The newspaper this morning, The Times, that this TEO brought in February 2015, only one has actually been implemented. Is that correct?
Well, the TEOs have only just started to be used. That is correct. I can't
Why? When they've been on the books for more than 2 years?
They've been a part of the tools that the security services can use where they want to. It's absolutely right that the government provides the different tools that security services and police can use.
But
it's not for us to say...
I'm sorry to talk over you, Home Secretary, but if they're so good and if they're a vital part of the toolkit, we've had them for a little north of 2 years, why only one?
It's up to the security services to decide which ones are the ones that might need a TO and which aren't. This isn't the only initiative that there is to keep us safe. They have different types of initiatives and pieces of legislation that they can use to try and make sure they keep us safe, to keep the potential terrorists out of this country. This is only one.
How long?
How long what?
For how long do they stay out of the country, the potential terrorists?
It depends on the particular circumstances of the individual. It depends whether they've got a British passport. It depends on the evidence against them.
What's the maximum they can be kept out of the country?
The maximum is 2 years.
What happens then?
Well, it depends on the individual. It depends on what the circumstances. It will depend on the circumstances and the amount of information about each individual.
So it can be reissued?
It will depend on the individual circumstances.
That's not a yes or a no, is it? Can it be reissued?
Well, it does depend on what the circumstances are, under certain circumstances, but not under others.
So yes, it can under certain circumstances.
Well, I'll let you use your language and I'll use mine.
Well, you're the Home Secretary.
I know, and that's why I'm choosing my words carefully, because I don't want to make any mistakes here.
OK. TPIMs is another part of what I understand to be is the valuable toolkit. How many TPIMs are in place at the moment?
We have 7 out. We name how many we have every quarter, and there will be a new report coming out shortly.
So here's the thing that some of my listeners would find confusing, Home Secretary. It is reported that there are around 350 fighters from the IS who have returned, and we've got, say, 9 or whatever it might be TPIMs, and we've got 1 or whatever it might be TEO. That's over 300 that we've got nothing on.
We've got nothing on some of the people that the security services are keeping a watch on. But
how wise might that be?
That doesn't mean that they're not following them and being very careful about making sure that they are clear about their moves, and they have other parts of their methods to make sure that they keep a careful watch to make sure that we are kept safe. I appreciate that you want to draw me on what is going on within the security services, but I can't do that. All I can do is make sure that they have the right...
That we've had examples of people falling into rent arrears and being able to make payments because the universal credit rollout hasn't worked the way it should, and then you call up to try and get things right, and you're charging people at the lower end of the income scale 55 pence a minute.
But people report regularly to the job centre. That's where they can get the help.
If you call on a mobile phone, you're charging 55 pence a minute.
Well, I would encourage people to visit the job centre, go in and get the advice.
Right, but these are people who've got kids to look after, they can't afford sort of nannies or help to look after them. Phoning may be the only way. They've got people visiting, to plumbers, whatever. It's just the normal things of life. So getting on the phone is quite important. Now, if it's a landline, it's cheaper. I understand that. But many people now don't have landlines because you save, again, if you're counting the pennies, you save on the rental from a landline and you get as cheap as possible mobile deal. And you're charging them 55 pence a minute. Why are you doing it?
Because this is what I'm saying. We're moving to a new model of the way we support people. It's much more interventionist. It's much more about helping people get into work.
Right, by charging them, why are you charging them 55 pence a minute to call up and try and get their universal credit payments fixed?
Well, I don't know the details of the call line, and as you've said, it's more affordable if you ring up the landline.
But lots of people don't have landlines these days.
The fundamental model is that people go into their local job centre, they get that advice and support, and they can receive those additional payments if that's what needed. And that's what people want. They want face-to-face advice.
I'm not arguing about the principle. That would be another debate. But you do sometimes wonder if the government knows what it's doing.
Well,
it's charging students who are paying back loans over 6%. Nobody else is paying 6% interest these days when the basic rate's 0.25. And now you're charging people on welfare 55 pence a minute.
I mean, changes have already been made by the Welfare Secretary. So at conference, he announced this additional approach of people being able to go in and get same-day support. This is a system that's being gradually rolled out, but the majority of the feedback I get from my constituents about universal credit is incredibly positive. And I don't think we should allow the fact that, that there have been issues, which the Welfare Secretary has acknowledged, to overshadow what is a hugely positive programme. There is very positive feedback about it.
You're the Chief Secretary of the Treasury. You're in charge of the money. You count the money. Will you speak to the Work and Pensions Department about these phone charges?
I speak to the Work and Pensions Department all the time
Yeah, but
about
that's
their
not
budgets.
what I asked you. Will you speak to them about this? I mean, it's
sure
at the
David
top end,
Hawke-
but you know sometimes calling things, you get put on, I had experience this morning of calling something, you get put on hold. So very quickly you are racking up the money. Would you like to speak to them about doing something
Well, I'm
about
sure
it?
David Gork is looking, as we roll out universal credit, about how to give people the best possible service. But the reason we're doing that is that we want to help people get into work. That is working. It's been the huge success of our welfare policy over the last 7 years. And that adjustment of people getting on to being paid monthly is really important.
All right,
So we
no,
don't just have one group of people who've been left behind.
Laura.
Last July in Downing Street, in her famous Just About Managing speech on the day she became Prime Minister, Theresa May described several burning injustices, as she put it. What does this Queen's speech do to make sure the criminal justice system stops treating black people more harshly than white?
Well, there are measures in the, I believe, in the bill on the courts, which I think is supposed to address some of those issues. And I think one thing in particular that we are looking at is measures to. Hang on a second.
Let me turn to another burning injustice that she highlighted. What does this Queen's speech do to improve mental health care?
Well, what we want to see on mental health care is a proper understanding, and there indeed I think you will find, to get back to your first question.
Well, why don't we do the questions in the order I'm asking them? It's not a Two Ronnie sketch. You can't answer the question before last. I'll tell you what this Queen's speech says. It promises a review of the laws on mental health and a discussion paper on children's mental health. There are no policies, just a review and a discussion from a party that's been in government for 7 years.
It also mentions the injustice that you spoke of earlier. I appreciate your desire to sort of push me around, but that is...
Well, I've got a desire to deal with the burning injustices which Theresa May herself highlighted in Downing Street less than a year ago. Let me turn to the policies which less than 2 weeks ago won the support of 13.7 million voters. Ditching the pension triple lock, reforming social care, energy cap, 100 new free schools a year, an end to the ban on selective schools, a free vote on the Hunting Act, changes to the winter fuel allowance. 13.7 million people voted for these policies, and poof, they're gone.
Well, I'm not going to hide it from you that the election did not turn out exactly as we would have hoped. But as you know...
Didn't you win the election?
Well, we are certainly the largest party, and yes, we did win the election in the sense we are 56 seats ahead.
Unambiguously, what will the cap be?
Well, as I've just answered, I'm not going to give you a different answer from the one I've given Faisal. No, it's not about not knowing, Jeremy. It's about thinking what... It's about thinking...
You don't know, do you? You propose to increase national insurance contributions from the self-employed. Within a week, you back down from that. You accept that?
Yes, I accept that.
If I was sitting in Brussels and I was looking at you as the person I had to negotiate with, I'd think, she's a blowhard who collapses at the first sign of gunfire.
Discussion and dialogue is the best way to resolve these problems. We've had a lot of difficulty in having that discussion and dialogue, but when we finally were able to have it, we got,
Gosh,
I think,
what a painful discovery. It's taken you threats of strikes, actual strikes, it's taken total disruption of the NHS, and you say you've now discovered that talking's a good idea.
Well, with great respect, John, you're suggesting that the reason that we didn't have a negotiated outcome was because of decisions that I took, and that's fundamentally not the case.
Today you've accepted what the doctors have been saying all along, that this is not just about pay. It's about the whole workings of the NHS. Finally, you've accepted this.
Well, I fully accept that the bugbears and frustrations of many junior doctors are about more than just their contract. But what I needed to do as Health Secretary is address the issue of how we improve weekend care in our hospitals. This was a manifesto commitment that we were elected on a year ago, to have a safer 7-day NHS and to be able to promise all NHS patients that no matter what day of the week you're admitted to hospital, you'll get the same high quality care.
Given the toxicity of this whole situation and much of it swirling around you personally, are you considering your position tonight?
No, I want to be Health Secretary for a long time. I'm passionate about the NHS, and I want the NHS
well, you have
to
written
be...
about privatising it.
John, you've got to let me... No, absolutely not. And you know that that's absolute nonsense. I'm passionate about making our NHS the safest, highest quality healthcare system in the world. That's what I believe in. But I also have to be a Health Secretary who delivers my promises to the British people.
That was well before the Iraq war. So there's no correlation here between foreign policy and this appalling act of terrorism. And that's where Jeremy Corbyn has gone wrong.
Isn't it possible that things like the Iraq war did not create the problem of murderous Islamic fundamentalists, but the war has unquestionably sharpened the resentments felt by such people in this country and given them a new pretext?
Well, I don't think you should allow pretexts for people who blow up innocent children.
Because those are actually the words of Boris Johnson, the Foreign Secretary.
Well, they're not entitled to excuses. You know, this was an act of murder, and of callous murder at that, taking the lives of innocent civilians.
What I just put to you was not Jeremy Corbyn, it was Boris Johnson.
Well, what were the words you were quoting?
The Iraq war did not create the problem of murderous Islamic fundamentalists, though the war has unquestionably sharpened the resentments felt by such people in this country and given them a new pretext. He goes on to say the Iraq war did not introduce the poison into our bloodstream, but yes, the war did help to potentiate that poison. That's exactly the same as what Jeremy Corbyn is saying now.
No, I think it's more is what he's saying that of what I've said. He said you can't use attacks like this to explain away terrorism.
Actually, on the contrary, he said it is difficult to deny that they have a point, the Told You So Brigade.
Well, I don't agree with that.
So Boris Johnson, the Foreign Secretary, is wrong?
Well, I'd have to see the words that you're trying to quote to me. I don't have them in front of me.
Well, I've just told you them.
Well, I'll have to look at them. What I don't accept is that you can explain away terrorist attacks in this country by simply saying there's been an issue with our foreign policy over the last few years.